Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Wednesday, May 26th. Wow. So day 18 of working in this little tiny journal. So thank you so much for joining me again. If this is your first time joining me, I've been doing this for 17 days. Now it's going to be the 18th day. And you can catch up on those videos right here on Facebook and then also on my YouTube channel. And so they're all being recorded and they're all available for you to watch and go back and just kind of see how this thing is kind of progressed. Because I know at least yesterday we had some folks that I think were tuning in fairly recently. So anyway, I appreciate people who are already popping into the comments saying hi. So if you want to say hi, if you want to say where you're from, where you're tuning in from, that's always awesome to see. So appreciate you being here. If you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, please let me know. Pop them in the comments and I'll try to address them. If I don't address them directly through the live stream, I'll come back and try to address them in the comments myself. So anyway, appreciate you being here. Yeah, day 18 of working in this little journal. And, you know, it's like for me, working in a journal is a very slow kind of buildup of small actions. I really feel like with my art, that's kind of what I'm after is this kind of slow build up layering process. I don't sit down and make a single page and then move on to the next page. If you've been tuning in, you can see how I jump around and I constantly do that. Sometimes I'll just sit and work with one single material and, you know, jump around and work on multiple pages. Sometimes I'm reaching and grabbing different things. It kind of depends on what the mood strikes as I'm working. So I kind of tend to have like, oh, I'm going to start off with this, and then we'll see kind of where it goes. And that's kind of how I work naturally, even in my big journal. So you know, a lot of times I'll sit down and be like, oh, I'm just going to use watercolor today, and then I'll start using it. Next thing I know, it's like I'm collaging stuff in or I'm writing something, because I allow the ideas to kind of pop up. I'm always listening to that intuitive voice, that little voice in my head that as I'm flipping through my journal goes, oh, it might be really cool to kind of do this there. And so I always try to kind of make room for that. I don't plan this out. I don't have a big kind of scheme of how this is supposed to go. So anyway, today I wanted to get back into the words. I've been focusing a lot on the art making, and part of that is because working in this small book, it's much different than working in my big book. In my big book, I just throw everything in there, including the words, and I do a lot of reflective writing. In the little book, it's a little space. So I'm trying to be a little bit more selective with the words that go in to the book, or how the words go in, and sort of what the meaning and what the message is of this little book. The theme is emergence, and I've done some writing. So I did some stream of consciousness writing. I've done some lists. I've done some found poetry using the blackout poetry technique. I've discovered words on a photocopy of magnetic poetry that I have. So I just sort of like try to access words and meaning and messages in a variety of ways. So today, I think what I want to do is I want to include more words, more, I don't know if I'm going to put in any quotes or anything like that, but there are definitely things that I want to do. And so anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. And I'll talk about what I have and sort of where, at least how I'm planning on starting everything out. So let me go ahead and switch this over. So of course I have my little journal. I have my index cards where I made a list based on the word emergence. And then I made a list based on that word crack, crack or crevice or crevasse. I have my writing. This is writing I did back during the first week. I don't know when it was, maybe the third day, second or third day. And I was working on the tracing paper, and I cut some of it off. And if you didn't see that, I actually included it and cut it into strips and included it so it goes through the book. And it actually starts on the very first page. and goes all, it's right here if you can't see it. Goes through here, and then it jumps down here. So I think I want to start with that. Number one, it's just going to get me going. And number two, trying to think about how the pages tie together. So this was the page where I stopped with the tracing paper. So if I turn the page, there's no more of that tracing paper. So I think it'd be kind of neat to come in and do that. And that's a good place to start. So let me kind of make some room. So I've got my glue paper because I'm going to be cutting and gluing. And I've got my glue stick, and I've got my scissors. I did find my big scissors. There last week, I couldn't find them, or maybe that was on Monday. I couldn't find them, and I just had moved them off of my table. They were laying on a stack of things that I moved, and I was like, where is it? So anyway, all I was doing was cutting this and gluing in. So I'm thinking like something like this might be good. I want it to go below this word balance. So I think if I have it down low and even go right over top of that little picture from the Portland Japanese garden. So just flip that over. And when gluing in tracing paper, even though the glue stick isn't super wet, there's enough moisture in it to make the tracing paper curl. But my glue paper has so much glue on it that it's kind of sticking down pretty flat today. Also, it's very hot and humid here in Northern Virginia. It's supposed to be in like the mid 90s. I'm not sure. I know we've got Francis tuning in from London. I don't know what that would be in Celsius, but definitely hot. So with this, I think I wanted to turn and go up like that. And then I'm aiming for like right between the boots, the boot prints. So I think if I cut it right there. And the reason I'm aiming for right between the boot prints is that I want it to wrap around. And I wanted to go straight across right between these two windows. So, sometimes I do things and I don't really think too much about it. There's not much planning. It's just kind of, I wing it. And other times I kind of look ahead and try to plan it out a little bit. But that's just sort of like planning that instant, kind of taking into account like what's kind of going on, not planning out like this is what this page is going to look like. And so then that can come straight, yeah. So oftentimes whenever I sit down to work, especially in the journal, I might not know exactly what I want to be doing. And so I might need a little bit of time just to get going. I always feel like the laws of motion, Newton's laws of motion, that an object at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force, and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. And so I kind of feel like that with art is that, you know, when you sit down to do art, it's like, you know, you haven't been doing art. And so, you know, you've been at rest. Um, and so it can be kind of hard to overcome that inertia at first because you weren't working on art. And then then you have to sort of switch those gears and then come back and be like, okay, now I'm ready to work. So these words are like getting lost in what's underneath that tracing paper. That tracing paper is becomes a little bit more transparent whenever I glue it down. I mean, it almost totally disappears. I can see it; it's a little bit more like fuzzy, um, but those words sort of just disappear. But the fact that they're there, and that there's this thread. I was talking about that yesterday. That thread, kind of going through. So I'm thinking here it might be interesting. I've got it going up here, but then maybe the next one picks up and goes across. It's interesting sometimes though to have it like wrap through holes, but I think I'm going to go across there. So when I'm working on my big book, you know, this kind of writing just gets put in the big book, like a lot of times right off the bat, right from the beginning. Um, but working in such a smaller space, you know, if I did that amount of reflective writing, it would take up a lot of space in the book. And you know, maybe that's okay. But I kind of just want to be a little bit more thoughtful with what goes in. I might do some like reflective writing or making lists or things, but so one of the themes that I've been bringing up, not my big theme of emergence, but is that idea of juxtaposition. And so this word, you know, this word shadow, that's been there since last week. I glued it in, and then as I was wrapping this around, this word which I highlighted on my writing just happened to be there. So now shadow escaping, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, you know, you kind of put those words together, and then all of a sudden with the images it really starts to kind of take on a different meaning. So just with that word shadow was one thing, but now shadow escaping. And then if I think back to my big idea of emergence, I mean, I don't know, there's something poetic about that. You know, it's completely unplanned. So I think if we make room for that, make room for the unplanned, make room for surprises in our art. I always I've always kind of thought like, if I have it all planned out, then why do I want to make it? Because I've already made it in my head. Now, yeah, sometimes you do, like, you know, if you have to cut a bunch of wood, or you have to, you know, there are things that you have to really consider. You know, you might need to plan some things out. I love that process of discovery. Change the pages. One was covered with glue. This one's kind of torn, so I'm going to change another one. So I constantly use this. I mean, you can see all the, like the different colors and the different textures. I've used this for years. So the glue dries and I can just work on top of it. So I have this word stardust, and I'm thinking it might be really interesting if I wrap either to have the word stardust on this side, but if I flip it over, I have the brain on this side. So I think kind of trying to plan that out. So I think if I cut here, just trying to figure out how it's going to fall. Just kind of thinking about how art sometimes is like life. Sometimes with life, it's kind of trying to balance the planned and the unplanned. It's like, you know, we can have all these grand plans for our lives, but then something seems to come along and go, all right, let's kind of rethink this. So I think I'll maybe do one more strip, see how where that goes, and then kind of feel like I might want to do a little bit more to some of these pages before I do some more. I just like this idea that, you know, like I did this writing during that first week, like the second or third day. So, you know, here it is 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks later. Yeah, this is the fourth week of doing it. Yeah, see how it the tracing paper curls up. Come on. Right, that one's being really, really pesky. I think I'll just cut that little part off. So Deirdre's asking the question about, was it the Pitt pen? Yeah, I used a pink Pitt pen on the tracing paper, and then the silver was a Uniball silver gel pen, and then the black was another Pitt pen. But I've used Uniball, the Vision pens on this. I've used pencil. I've used, you can even marker, like the Crayola markers. Works really well. You have to let it dry. So Frances is mentioning about how the pages, as she looks at them, she says they feel kind of finished to her, and I think, you know, it's, I think I tend to overdo pages too. That's one of the things I tend to do. Yeah, I do build up pretty complex pages and kind of keep going, and probably either later this week or maybe on Monday. So Monday will be my last kind of in this series. It's the last day of May. It's Memorial Day here in the U.S., but I plan on being here same time. But I want to talk about sort of like embellishing and maybe kind of resolving pages or kind of finishing some things up. So anyway, so that's got me into working, got that tracing paper going through. So I feel like, you know, now we have that thread of the tracing paper just starting on that first page, going all the way through near the end. So probably like 3/4 of the way through the book. And so now what I'm thinking about is I want to use some different words, and there's some different ways that I can do that. So what I'm going to do is I've got some paper. So that's what I thought I could do is cut. So one of the things I liked was the magnetic poetry. And again, I just stuck the magnetic poetry to the back of a cookie sheet, and scanned it on my computer, and then have a file that I can print out and make photocopies of. Something like this could be really simple to do in a document on the computer and not actually have magnetic poetry, and you could make whatever words you want. But I just like the fact that it's magnetic poetry, that there's that connection to something that I had in my apartment on my refrigerator. People might not know that, but of course that's part of part of the fun, part of that sort of what's underneath that viewers may not know. But I like that idea of having the words on separate paper that goes in. So that's why I have this colored paper, is that I want to be able to write words on it and then glue them in. I'm thinking maybe making a list, you know, and so I'm trying to find a spot where that could be, you know, maybe there's 3 words or 4 words that I really like. So just trying to think about like where those words might go. And so I've got several different colors, but I've got a lot of red, so I'm kind of thinking maybe using the red. So I can see one here maybe. I don't know. I'm not really sure yet, so I'm not even sure what words I'm going to use. So maybe that would be a good place to think about. Is actually could be really interesting to have the words here. So let me close up my glue stick before it dries out. So I think I am going to start with the red. I have some orange and I have this kind of off green. Let me cut that a little bit straighter. So I'm just thinking, so I have these lists that I've made. So I have my writing and I have my book, just really kind of thinking about everything and what do I want to put down? I feel like this is my Emergence journal, and I haven't even used that word yet in the book, other than maybe in that writing on the tracing paper. So I like that word emerge. Just going back over the letters, making it a little bit thicker, easier to read. Saw the word process as well. I like that. Process can be a noun or a verb. Just kind of having trouble thinking of a third word that I might want to use. I like the fact that, process can be a verb or a noun, but when placed with emerge, process almost becomes we see it naturally more as a verb. And I think if I have another verb, the only thing that I'm coming up with is build, create. Yeah, how about create is a little bit better. Okay, so now thinking about where I can put it. I was thinking here. The problem is it's just a little too big for that. I could trim off the edges, but I don't think I want to trim it. And I already have some words there. I think it'd be cool. I like the contrast with the red and the blues. But then there's these three words there, so it's kind of like maybe another place. That might be interesting. That red and that green really contrast. Yeah, why not? There's one word that I keep coming back to. Actually, it's on, or was it? It's on one of these pages. But it's a word that I've also been thinking about lately, and I think it can really ties into my theme, and that is the word legacy. Actually, on one of the pieces of tracing paper it was written. I don't know where I saw. Oh, right there, the word legacy. I'm thinking on here might be interesting. Again, juxtaposition of a word with an image. Hearing some tapping outside the window. I think it's starting to rain. Yep, definitely raining. It's been a really interesting process of working this way and live streaming, because it's like I'm trying to not just sit here and work and not say anything, because that's typically what I do, is sit and work. And so I try to talk about what I'm thinking about. So it's been a real interesting thing to do that, to sit down and sort of explain and talk about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It definitely makes it a little bit of a different experience. Good experience. Now that I have this red paper, I think I'm just going to put some red paper just to kind of repeat it, not write anything on it. I think that might be a little too long. So let that stick out a little bit. It's still a little wet. I'll trim that off a little bit later. But starting to get kind of thick now. Yeah, I feel a lot of these pages are kind of very close to being finished or resolved. There are some other things that I might do to them, and like I was mentioning earlier, that there are things that I like to do to embellish them even more, just to sort of put those like finishing touches on. But yeah, it's like I really like this page a lot. So I kind of probably won't do much anything else to this page or this little spread. Might end up doing more words like this at some point. Yeah, I find it real interesting how it's like things all of a sudden kind of get a little bit plainer, not quite as built up. But I'm thinking that's a good stopping point for today. Like I said, I'll trim this little bit off. I'm also thinking I have this fold out here, and it's got square corners where all the other corners are rounded. So at some point, I'll probably kind of knock those corners off and round them over a little bit. But anyway, I think I kind of wraps it up for today. So if you've got any questions or comments or concerns, you can just pop them in the comments there, and I'll try to address them. There are some things that I saw that I didn't have a chance to talk about, but I'll respond and type something up for people. Yeah, so day 18, got 2 more days this week, and then 1 more day, so 3 more days of working. I won't finish this, so it probably will be something that maybe I work in more and maybe live stream. I'll probably go back to doing 1 live stream a week on Wednesdays. But anyway, really appreciate you being here. Appreciate you tuning in. And like I said, I'll be back tomorrow, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So thank you so much for tuning in, and let me know if you need anything. And yeah, see you tomorrow. And as always, happy creating.